Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Chronic Burnout, Flourish Forward. Today, I am thrilled to have a conversation with Jagmeet Sangha, a Board Certified Behavior Analyst and founder of Behavior Pivot Consulting. Jagmeet specializes in creating healthier, neuro-inclusive workspaces by focusing on building community, trust, and employee strengths. In today's episode, we dive into a topic that's more critical now than ever: how intentional community building in the workplace can help combat burnout and foster an environment where neurodivergent individuals can thrive. We'll be discussing the role of organizational behavior management, OBM, in promoting executive functioning, clear communication, and transparency, and how leaders can use these strategies to create supportive and productive workplaces. Jagmeet also shares her personal insights on how neurodiversity can drive innovation, encourage rejuvenation, and create a truly inclusive culture. So, whether you're a leader, a manager, or someone interested in workplace well being, this episode is for you, my friend. I'll be sharing a way you can take what we are discussing today and grab more tools to help you build a work life and career that works for you at the end of today's show. So stick around. Let's get started, friends.
Step out of the shadows, feel the power rise, catch the spark inside you, let your spirit fly. Beyond the chronic burnout, Carole Jean's your guide. Find your steady rhythm, nice joy on the tide. Flourish forward, bright and bold. Leave the burnout far behind. In this journey, hearts unfold. Power's yours, seek and find.
Jagmeet Sangha, I am so excited that you are here today having this conversation with us as we are talking about community. And as we lead into our November career, we're doing a crossover here where we're talking about the power of community and career in our workplace and beyond. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to talk about all of these topics and the junction of all of these topics.
I really love that because I think one of the things that happens so often in life across the board is we get into career, we maybe have changed jobs or we've been in the same job for a while. We get in this like routine, this rut, this habit of we show up, we do the thing, and we're just like, okay, I'm done, I'm going home. And, we don't even recognize that maybe we've moved into this long-term chronic stress place, maybe even into burnout. And we forget about the things that energized us around the community element at work when we first started, I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for most of us that are in the working kind of space and careers, we're spending more time at work and doing the work for our jobs than we are with our families or ourselves or maybe doing some of our hobbies. And so I completely agree. And I think that how do we avoid getting stuck in a rut, and how do we figure out what are the ways that we need to continuously, not every day needs to be so joyful, so purposeful, but for the most part of it should be something that you're motivated, you're excited to get up, because it can have a long-term stress on our bodies, on our health, and everyone around us, really, if we're not able to kind of tap into that joy within work.
Absolutely. And I think there's two elements that we kind of talked about back in the green room before we hit record. And it's that, we tend to forget that, community shows up in all different ways. And, from the employer or organization side of things, we are responsible for creating community, because by hiring and employing people, creating teams and projects, we are creating an ecosystem, a community within that. And, the culture that we establish or don't establish with intention really impacts the well-being and the overall energy levels, productivity, the innovation that our team has in community. What have been some of the things that for you, when you look at organizations or you look at from the employer side of things, what are some of the places with intention that we can say, this is a good place to be mindful of how you create community?
Yeah, I think you can start at the micro level of you bring on an employee and that employee even just knows who their direct supervisor is. And it sounds so basic. It sounds like, oh, of course I know who it is. But so many times in organizations, there might be multiple people that are supervising or, multiple teams that are responsible for the same kind of output within that job. And individuals may not know who they need to go to, who they can build trust with, who they can kind of get support from, or it might be really scattered. There might be multiple people. So even having organizations to kind of like really hone in and say, okay, does everyone have a dedicated mentor or do they have a dedicated support system supervisor? Ideally just one person. So that way that they have that one-to-one. And then kind of zooming out a little bit, for larger organizations where you have hundreds and thousands of kind of staff and employees doing different things and it's hard to bring everyone together. Employee resource groups have been such a wonderful way to build that community. And I actually just had a really neat presentation earlier this week, and this is my third time visiting this really large bank, and they have employee resource groups for different topics. And these individuals come together, they're learning together, they're growing together. They've built a community within their community to lean on various topics that are meaningful personally to them.
ERGs, when done well, help create such beautiful community because it's you can find your people, your community within the community of the overall organization. And I love that. As we also think about the element of community in our career, I think sometimes too, people forget that connecting, networking, we always hear, oh, you need to network to move up the corporate ladder or to grow your career, grow your business. If you're an entrepreneur or solopreneur, as some of us are, or in private practice, and, the cheese stands alone over here and I'm wearing the hats for all jobs in my business.
Yeah.
And I think, we tend to, in a lot of ways, especially if we get in sort of that doing, because I'm feeling tired and I'm putting in exactly what I can, and then I'm going home and I'm crashing. I think it's that element of, if you're really looking to maybe change careers or to grow and enhance your career from that professional development side of things, those external, not just through networking, but finding community, like workplace connection community. What are some of the things that you suggest or that you find are really helpful when we talk about your career community? Because it may not be the community within your own organization.
Yeah, that is like such an important topic. I think that, within my field, so I'm a behavior analyst, a BCBA, and I've worked directly for about 15 years with families, with children with autism, in schools, in communities, in homes. And, back when I was newly certified, a big part of what I wanted to do was just kind of learn of all of the things that I didn't know. So, you get certified and then you got a job. And then so how else do you expand your own growth? And I was really fortunate enough at that time. There was a small group of us. We had started kind of a meetup group and we would meet once in a while. We would read journals. We would have, fun times together. And so a little bit of both, a little bit of mix of like, hey, we're coming together and talking about these topics. Well, fast forward, a decade later, these are people that I have some really solid friendships with, both personally and professionally. And they're doing all sorts of different work within this field. And so when I need to reach out for resources, when I need development for myself, when I'm looking for new opportunities, when I need to think outside of the box, this group, and over the years, that has kind of grown. These individuals are the community professionally that I have been able to lean on. And that's something that I would recommend to anyone at any stage of their career is you have your work family and, and be connected and figure out ways to kind of build relationship and rapport there, but expand outside of that and really get outside of your comfort zone to meet other people within your field, because those connections, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. And those are the connections that can really kind of help you in the long run. And you never know when or how, but it's really important to build that out.
It is. And I love how you brought all of that together and just sort of the way that it also gives us a different resource. Because I think sometimes within community, especially if we're talking about organizational community, um, we I think we tend to see a lot of blind spots. And if we're trying to solve a problem or we're trying to see a different perspective on something that maybe, the majority of our in-house community is sort of all in the same place of we have this similar blind spot to a certain degree, having that external career network of people that's community for you, it supports you when you're struggling in a particular element of your job. It helps you to find different resources, to see different perspectives, because everybody's coming from a different sort of background and community base within their organizations. I love that. And I think one of the things that all of this leads to, which is such a beautiful part of our conversation today, is how community is really such an important element, because during burnout, we tend to opt naturally for isolation.
Yeah.
We self-isolate because we're like, I really would love to go do that, but I'm going to say no, even though it's something I would love to go do, because I don't feel like I have the energy and I have to do this thing later. And I don't want to be so burnt out that I can't do the thing that I have to do. And so we bypass the things that we want to do, which actually rejuvenate us. And you're going to talk about some of those things in a little bit. But Jagmeet, what are some of the things you've experienced in your own life when you've gotten burned out? Or how did you recognize you were in burnout? How did it show up? What has been this experience for you, so that maybe somebody out there today goes, oh my gosh, yes, I relate. That's so been what I've been feeling.
Yeah, burnout is so personal and so individualized, right, for everyone. And you are definitely the expert on that, more so than me. But, from that strategy or that behavioral perspective, when I teach my kids early on, they're pretty young, but I teach them like, okay, we got to track our behaviors and we have our calendar and these are my goals for the month and how am I doing on this? And when I started to recognize, well, one of my goals is to have kind of this like peaceful atmosphere at home, but I keep snapping, or I'm keep, kind of fighting this, routine of like, oh, this is not done or that's not done. Or there was just a lot of resistance, both professionally of like, oh, I'm just not able to accomplish something. Like, why isn't it happening? Or, everything is laid out, everything is perfect in terms of how I want to do something, but it just doesn't, I can't execute it. And there was just a lot of kind of the inability for me to kind of like get things done. And, that when that happens, that leads to frustration. It leads to, maybe I'm not good enough. This is not, something that I'm capable of doing. And so recognizing those patterns over time was really important for me to recognize maybe this is some level of burnout. Maybe, what I really want to be doing and what my values are really not aligning to maybe the work that I'm doing right now, or the way that I'm even thinking about the work that I should be doing. And so having kind of that behavioral background, I also do a lot of work in acceptance and commitment therapy. And ACT kind of really takes this model of like, what are your personal values? And I had taken this 6-week course and they said, okay, we're going to identify your values. I'm like, oh yeah, these are my values. And I had this like 2-page list. And they said, okay, now from this list, you need to pick 5 and those are your values. And it took me the entire 6 weeks plus more to really narrow down what those values were. And once I had them, it really provided that compass for me of like, oh, I think that all of this is important, but really like this is important. And so being able to do that exercise and really understanding, we're all taught like big house and a car and money and that, we're all taught that these things, the vacations, like these are all important, but like maybe that's not important for you in this chapter or in this season, or maybe it's not important at all. maybe that's like a social context that, that's being pressured on you. So having that sense of like reflection, like what is most important to you? And then what are all the things that you're doing that are not aligning with that importance and that purpose? And then how do you slowly start shaping those things to kind of carve out that burnout and be on this journey of more sustainability for yourself?
I love that you brought this into the conversation, Jagmeet. This is just all the happy whiz pops in my brain because in the unveiling method, it's one of the foundation builders that we do after self, which is values.
Yes.
And I do a specific 4-step process of unmasking your values because so often we have agreed, adopted, or somewhere along the way, these values we've taken on in our life aren't really ours, or maybe they aligned with us at a certain time in our life, a certain age or season, but right now in this moment, no, it doesn't. And I think when we're talking about community too, as we look at how our values show up with, do they align with what I'm actually doing? And I love that you did like the behavior tracking kind of thing. And I do not love the word behavior. I really don't, because I think it has so many negative connotations, especially in the neurodistinct population, because of the way it's been weaponized.
Yes.
Your behavior isn't appropriate. You're having behaviors. And then
Mhm.
it's like shaming you and making it feel like, oh my gosh, because I'm responding to something that is not in alignment with my values or with my needs or my sensory system, I'm being told I'm wrong. And
Yeah.
so I love that you brought that part in because really it's how are we responding? What are our actions externally that are just giving us some indicators for that place of awareness of, is something in my life in conflict with my values? And so I want to ask, when you went through this and you had the 20 and you were kind of refining and honing that down to your 5, did you start to get some clarity on, oh, this is actually, now that I've identified this value, I see where the conflict or the resistance was coming, where I was feeling drained in certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it took a long time, but I think that as I was starting to kind of hone in on like, okay, what is most important to me and like really kind of getting in this rhythm and getting uncomfortable really of like, oh, this is not important. I always thought this was important. Things just naturally started to shift. And so, whatever would happen, it would kind of be this sense of like, okay, well, I've lost this opportunity, but maybe that's not really what I needed or wanted at that time. Yes, that might be something that I wanted before, or might be something I want in the future. And so then slowly kind of getting eased into this idea of what is supposed to be, right? In terms of how do I live in that acceptance? And again, it's very much of that ACT approach of like you're become a little bit more of that observer of like, okay, this is the acceptance of what's happening right now. How can I, let's romanticize the word behavior again, because I completely understand where you're coming from within that perspective, but our behavior is really just that reaction, right? And so how do we then kind of respond, kind of sit with this uncomfortable feeling, accept what's happening, and then realize, okay, these are my values and I want my behavior to match my values. These are the things that are important to me. And so, you know, it was easier to identify what are the things that I should be doing versus what are the things that I shouldn't be doing. And that, went professionally as well. And that was around the time that I opened my own kind of consulting practice, which was I really want to work with adults. I really want to help, neurodivergent adults, especially within autism, gain meaningful work experience and employment. And I also want to train workers and employers around what autism and neurodiversity is. And that all kind of came through this exercise of what do I really want to be doing? And so, and then, like you said, being a solo entrepreneur is not easy. And so, what can you do? You cannot do it all. And so, you pick and choose like, this is the one thing that I can focus on, or this is the one, route that I'm going to take. And that's really been helpful, kind of looking at it through that framework.
Oh, yes. And I love that so much. And you've got some strategies for energizing. And you shared one big one with us, which is really honing and refining your values. And I know for me that when I started the process of really reflecting, allowing space for me just to consider and to view, well, and really think about, well, what are my values? And not only what do I identify from a conscious level right now, an awareness level of these are my values, but then also giving them space to unmask them, to pressure test them, to say, okay, maybe that's been my value. Like for me, family is not in my top 5. And it took 18 months. Every 6 months, I was reevaluating my values because I was growing and doing a lot of inner work. And so every 6 months I tracked it because of course my data science brain's going, let's track
Yeah.
the data. So I do the first set. I'm like, okay, and I do it 6 months later. It's like, okay, and I do it another 6 months later, and I do it another 6 months later. And it was really interesting because over time, as I was exploring more about myself and really going, let me unmask these. Let me really dive in to see if this is a value that maybe I once agreed with, but it took a lot till the end to go, as a core value, yes, I value my family. It's in my top 10, but in
Mhm.
my top 5, like number 1 is my health because I've lost my health. I was completely bedridden. I couldn't even feed myself. I couldn't stand up or was in a wheelchair. I was on a walker. I finally got to drive a car. This was like 5 years of just really horrible health
Yeah.
because of burnout. And in that, what I lost and what I gained such valuable appreciation for was my kids were little. And I remember thinking, I just want to have enough health in my life to play with my kids because I feel like I'm missing so much. I had to give up a career that I loved because I was so physically ill.
Yeah.
And it's like, when do we really start valuing? So my health is what I value most of all because it's what allows me to value and cherish family. So as we think about strategies for these things that energize us, because when we are in being our values, right, then we are organically and by natural extension doing our values and not putting a lot of effort into it. It's a natural flow. What are
Yeah.
some other things, some other strategies that energize us, that help build that powerhouse that's in us?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. I think that so much of this is when something breaks, how do we respond? And a lot of times things need to break in order for them to build again because they're breaking for a reason. It's not effective enough, or our chapter or that time is run out, or especially within the organization. Like processes break all the time. And that could be because your company is scaling up and that process was not acceptable, or it is not going to kind of lead you into this next kind of what your need is as your clients are growing or whatever's happening. And so really understanding that when something does break down, it's not a bad thing. And how do you then create that buffer and that response for yourself to say, okay, now it's a time to reevaluate. And so instead of kind of completely shutting down and sitting back and saying everything is broken, being able to really go back to those values and say, okay, wait, if my value is health and I'm unable to do this right now, what is the one thing that I can do right now to kind of lean into it? And that kind of goes into those strategies, is that having that clear compass, number one. And so with that OBM, organizational behavioral kind of perspective, is that, how do we pinpoint, how do we know exactly what it is that we're working for? And so if we know where, our destination is, then we can map out, how are we going to get there? And you might have to take a different route. You might need to take a detour. You might need to, do these different things throughout that, but that that's your end goal. And so through that, being able to really kind of create your environment, creating your space that's going to support that. And space can include, just the empty area or whatever it is that you need, but it can also include people. It can also, again, include that community that you're going to need to tap into, because we're not here to do things alone. We're not meant to do that. We're all connected in that way. And that intersectionality of all of the things that we need in a day, right? It's not just, okay, I'm going to do this one job. I don't need anyone to do it. No, everything that's happening within you matters. And so how do we kind of bring it all together to make sure you're working towards that end goal?
Oh, I love the layers that you're bringing into this conversation, Jagmeet. They're so beautiful and they're so necessary. And I think one of the things that, from leadership standpoint that I hear quite often is we are growing, we are, expanding this new project or this new sector, or we're starting this new initiative within our company, our organization, and we want quote unquote buy-in.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about community and we're talking about leadership that's just like looking for the buy-in, they're looking to check the box to go, we're not going to give you resistance. What are some of the ways from internal leadership, community building, and utilization and connection in community within workplaces? What are some strategies that leadership can use in these places of growth and expansion or shifts and changing when we're talking about some of the biggest mistakes, or what are some of the biggest places that here's where you really tap into community? Here's how to really do this without looking to check a box of buy-in, but really get the support from your community.
Yeah, I think that buy-in is really masking for the word that we don't have rapport, right? Because
Oh, that is so good. Please call it like you see it. Thank you, ma'am.
right? I mean, if you have trust with somebody, right? And if you're transparent with somebody, because I find myself in this situation all the time, like, okay, we got to change processes and we're getting resistance for here, or we need to change this. But really what it comes down to is relationships, right? Like we're not on the same page in terms of trust or communication style or our values. Like, again, kind of going back to like, well, why are we here in this company? Well, our purpose is this, our mission is this. So if our mission is this the best way to get there? And everyone's going to have a different idea. That's neurodiversity in the workplace, right? Everyone's going to say this idea is best and this idea is best. But when you have relationships, when you have actual trust within those kind of settings, then you're able to kind of launch these ideas of, maybe we're going to pilot this. Maybe we're going to try this out. Or, hey, I have this new tool that we're going to be able to use. What do you think about this? Or tell me where your barriers are. Instead of just like, boom, it's done. We're unleashing this and it's got to go. And so I've seen it happen so many ways. And I've made the mistakes myself constantly. We're going through a new kind of process change. And, one of the main people that this is going to affect, like we didn't do enough kind of enough opportunity for them to understand, okay, how is this going to impact their day-to-day? What does it mean when the process changes? And so that person naturally feels very threatened. And that's on us as leaders to not do that. And so in our mind, we're like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to like roll this out. This is going to support them. This is going to change everything. But we missed the idea that, wait a minute, this is this person's entire job. They've helped build these systems. And so there's so much connection and ownership in terms of the work that they're doing here. And so how can we be sensitive and say, hey, we're actually kind of growing a little bit. These systems are becoming outdated. We need to do something a little bit more. What do you think? How do you think we can improve this? Right. And so really that's where the buy-in is, right? Like having that communication and them feeling safe enough to say, oh, no, I think you're totally doing something wrong. Let me tell you what you can do, because you need that dialogue. You need that safe space. But, unfortunately, those mistakes happen in the workplace all the time. And then as you recognize them, going back and saying, hey, this is where we misstepped. How do we go back? How do we repair this a little bit more?
Most definitely. And I think one of the things that I see so often when companies are making changes, when they're growing, when they're, seeing that systems or processes are no longer serving to their highest and best, there's this failure to just pause and check in with our core values that we have as a company, as a community, because those shift and change as the organization develops. And I think so often, a lot of times leaders, especially founders, are so deeply entrenched and tied to this is the core value. This is what we established in 1957. It's like, well, it's 2024. I'm sure there's some different values that have emerged by now. And those types of things, because as we grow and expand, I think another part of this is in community. It's also knowing that your workforce has shifted and changed as you've grown. And there has to be a place of, yes, from the leadership core standpoint down, this is what we establish and agree is our values, but it's also what has been the organic development and extension of what are the community values within our workforce, and how are they aligned or how are they misaligned, and how is this new growth or change either aligned with these values or misaligned, and how is that going to either propel us and accelerate this change and shift, or how is it going to create disruption? And I think that's, to me, the place where I see the power of community so often, and how we energize these big shifts that can be really super scary for those people who've been there for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really love how you said that, because change is hard for everyone, right? We all struggle with change. And sometimes we do really good because it's an exciting new change. We've already had that buy-in and we know what to expect. And then all of a sudden, like, we get there and we're like, oh, this is not what I expected, right? I want to go back. And then for most of the times, change, this idea of like, okay, we're going to do things differently. That's really threatening. It's really threatening for all of us. It's really scary. It's the unknown. And for many of us that, really thrive on routines and expectations and kind of knowing, what is going to be expected, change brings about so much uncertainty. And so therefore, we don't know what our behavior needs to be. We don't know what is going to be expected of us when we kind of go through this change. And so I think that constant reflection and kind of almost like changing and pivoting at a regular pace is really important, because then the only thing that's constant is change, right? And so, okay, we have a new season. I mean, we're getting into fall. So what can we shed? What can we kind of say, okay, this is, outgrown. This is like summer 2024 is over. Now we're getting into fall. Things change all the time around us. But I think that we, as social beings, we just want to like remain as is. And especially when some things are working good for us, right? When we're in a good place and we're like, oh gosh, I know I've nailed down the routine. I have everything ready. Like, we're just going up and up and up. We don't want anything to change. And that's really scary, because then we're getting in our comfort zone. And that's when, any sort of innovation, evolution, all of that becomes stagnant in terms of there's not going to be anything different happening. You have to be uncomfortable in order for something to grow, and for you to really understand what it is that you need to be doing.
Oh, just pause for a moment, y'all. Just allow that to percolate for a minute. So good. Yes. I love the next topic that we have on our little idea board that we put together, Jagmeet, and the ones that you came to the table with for our conversation today. And these were just, all the beautiful things. And when we talk about community in the workplace, especially, we hear a lot of lip service to a lot of DEI, DEIB initiatives, which is, we need to create neurodiversity, and we need to have inclusion, and we need to make sure that we have diversity and there's accessibility and all of these beautiful things. However, we don't think about why we're doing them. And one of the things that you brought to the table in this was that the neurodiversity, viewing this from a community standpoint as a source for rejuvenation. And I think when we're talking about kind of going into the thread that we're pulling through the conversation here is, as organizations are making adjustments, or, we know there's been a lot of layoffs in the last year. We know that we're in a really difficult economic time right now. We know there's a lot of political uncertainty, and there's some beautiful benefits when we are embracing and really allowing space for a variety of voices and experiences and expressions, as the source of our rejuvenation, because maybe that brilliant idea comes from other places, not the top, not the C-suite. So what are some of those neurodiversity? Can we use neurodiversity as a source of rejuvenation in this community context?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about all of these ideas of, okay, you have your values, this is what's important to you. But oftentimes those are related to, what is going to naturally fill your cup, right? And so this is the top priority in terms of what you may identify as your strength or as your talent, your skill. And when we have to work in a place that we're constantly masking, and so, definitely topics that you've touched so many times in terms of this idea of being somebody that we're naturally not, and having to show up in a way that is not natural for us. That is really exhausting. And as we know, that is leading to this constant burnout is that, okay, I've spent 8 hours, 10 hours a day being this person that I'm really not. So now I'm going to go home and unplug for 3 hours, 4 hours before I have to restart this day and kind of put on that mask again. And so instead, being able to have the opportunity to lean into like, well, what am I really good at? And is that something that I can fit into my current work, in my current workspace? And so whether, you're working in the office, you're working as an educator, you're working as a provider, what is it something that you can really feel your strength is, and what is it that you feel joyful enough to say, hey, I'm going to get up and go to work? And when you ask me what brings me joy, and I kind of gave you this boring answer of like, oh, these topics bring me joy, but they really do, because this is something that we should be teaching our kids when they're 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. How do we create space for them to be who they are instead of boxing them into saying, now you follow this line and now you sit here? And I am not saying that that's not important. Following directions, being engaged, meeting deadlines, very important, absolutely necessary skill. But then also giving them time, and having kids, I understand, like, okay, you have these extracurricular activities. Instead of packing them up, how do you just pick maybe one or two and say, this is something that's really giving you joy? Because when you go to this class or this activity or what you're doing, you're lighting up, and teaching those kids early on of, I can do all of these other things, and I can kind of meet the deadlines or be boxed in, but then this is how I unleash my creativity. Because before you know it, that creativity is going to lead into their workday or into their schoolwork, and be able to kind of bridge that gap for them. When you talk about companies, 90% of companies have this DEIB initiative, but only 4% even consider any sort of diversity within that. And I mean, that is the one common thread that we all have, is diversity. Every single brain is different. And if we're all expected to look and do exactly the same, we're not evolving as a society. Like, anything that's been created, it has not come from a typical mind. We're talking about innovation that is coming from minds that are thinking and processing the world so differently. And if we don't create space for that, we're not going to continue to evolve as a society. So how do we find that space to allow somebody to lean into it, to self-advocate for that, and then have that energize and rejuvenate them?
I love that you brought this from sort of the individual, but then also the collective community standpoint, because I think one of the most beautiful places that I see rejuvenation, especially in organizations, be it for-profit, nonprofit, everything in between, even, employee resource groups, I've seen this happen where we get in this rut, we get in this pattern, and we have challenges that come up, and all of a sudden everybody might be feeling a certain degree of like, this is not working, or this is feeling kind of stale. And I think the rejuvenation and what you brought into here is so beautiful, because if we just stop to give everyone in our community group, be it a team, be it, your volleyball team, your work team, whatever that is, and we just said, hey, what are you really good at? Like, not what everybody else says you're good at, but just like, what's your natural, like, this is so simple, stupid for me. I don't know why everybody doesn't do this. I don't think anything of it. I'm really good at it. but it's also something I enjoy. It's also something that sparks my joy. All the whiz pops goes off in my brain, and that is rejuvenating to me. Then we can take those things and go, how does that individual, maybe paired or partnered with these other individuals, how is that creating rejuvenation in our group, in our organization, in the direction that we want to go that
Yeah,
we've not considered before?
absolutely. And that's where the
Mm.
community comes in, and that's where the connections and the belonging and all of these things that are very, very important for us individually, but really more so as a collective, whether we're representing an organization or not, we have to be connected in that way.
Oh, most definitely. And in my research into how does long-term stress and burnout specifically impact neurodivergent and disabled humans, in the top 5 biggest energy drainers, when these things are not being met, they are the biggest contributing factor to that chronic stress and long-term burnout. Number 3 is authenticity. Number 2 is belonging. And you guys know we've been sprinkling this in throughout the month of October. And as we come to a close and we're moving into also talking about careers, I want to wrap up with Jagmeet around community and resources to fill your cup. So, Jagmeet, how would you give someone some guidance if maybe they haven't explored community before? Maybe they have and it hasn't been the best experience. Maybe it was not necessarily their group, but they felt like I should be part of that group somehow. What are some insights around finding communities and resources to fill your cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think leading with that authentic kind of compass again, right? And so if you really enjoy dancing, join a dance class and your community will follow. If you really enjoy research, kind of, join these groups. And so I think that, organizations like the meetups or Eventbrite and kind of these social kind of hubs that we have available, luckily in this kind of day and age right now, really offers such a great opportunity. For me, oftentimes it's going for a walk, and I'm naturally a very extroverted kind of, I will say hello, I will check in, I want to know all your business and get to know you type of person. And I'll say hello to the neighbor. And
Yeah,
then
I don't relate to that at all.
no, I am very like, I'll just talk to anybody. But it's created community for me. It's created, I'm in this area for this last 8 years, and I've been able to really build relationships with people. And, people come to me of like, hey, I can do this, or I need help here, or how can we work together on these things? And next thing you know, there's been a lot of overlap professionally. There's a lot of people, surprisingly, in this kind of work that I'm doing, and I've been able to collaborate with them. And so you just don't know where that's going to lead you. And community doesn't mean that you need to have 500 people in your community. It could just be one person. And so what you need is going to be different than everybody else. But community is important to, be involved, get identify, be that social being, and have an outlet for yourself in general.
What I hear you say, and I'm just going to recap here, it's like you don't have to start with like the quote unquote, this is your professional networking group, this is your community, like join this one, but like really start with the places where it aligns with what brings you joy, like what you really like, and find the group. And here for our introverts who are not like Jagmeet and I, who would just like, I would talk to anything that walks past me, even if it's the dog, I'm going to talk to the dog, it's like, oh, hey, how are you doing today? But if you are more introverted, then that's an even easier place, especially I know in the neurodistinct world, for me, it was always easier. Like I always brought my camera to any events that I went to. And it's like that gave me something to do instead of like the pressure being on, oh, you need to like make small talk or connect with folks. I found places that I like to be, and I found how I could be of service in those spaces to give me a way to connect with people that was less like pressure. So
Yeah.
that was way simpler for me. So for my introverts out there, there's your little kernel, your little nugget. And also, Jagmeet, this was something that it took me a little while to realize, because I would get into this like shame and guilt and like self-blame storm. if there was a group that I really thought I liked. Like I liked maybe what they did, or I liked, especially for like philanthropy. It's like, oh, I really love what they're doing. I want to be a part of that. And you get in, and then it's like the culture, the community there really isn't a fit for you. I would immediately go, oh, there's something wrong with me. Now I know it's like, oh, that just wasn't my group. Like I can find other groups that do the same thing and that they're going to be my people. But what are some ways that people can, so that we don't fall into the trap of, thinking it's us, not them, because sometimes it is them.
Yeah.
But like, how can we start to what are some things we should pay attention to when we're choosing communities so that they are filling our cup?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because so many of, again, you're dealing with behaviors of others, right? Not just your own behavior, but like, and sometimes you might feel like it's not your cup of tea, but then you force yourself to go again. And then there's somebody new in that group and you really vibe with that one person. So I would definitely, say oftentimes, and I get in that space a lot of like, okay, well, I tried it once and I'm not going to try it again. But just kind of saying, okay, if that's on your value list, like creating community becomes on your list, or finding community or any of that, then we have to just keep trying it and not giving up, and just kind of going in that mindset of like, if it works, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And like, because I think we put a lot of pressure on like, okay, I'm going to go to this group and I'm going to make my best friends and I'm going to come every Thursdays. Well, that's not usually how it works. I just recently joined a new gym, and one of my best favorite coaches just left, and I was like, I'm not going again. Well, I was like, well, I didn't even know the coach before he left, right? And I went because it was important for me to join this new gym. And I went back the other day and I'm like, yeah, no, it was really fun. I missed the coach, but this is fun still. Maybe I'll make some other friends with the other coaches. So we get stuck in our routines. We get stuck in what's expected, what we want to be, or we get stuck in like, okay, I'm comfortable here. But every single time something that's uncomfortable that happens, that's just another way for us to push ourselves. And on that note of even getting to know somebody that you would never be friends with actually is probably not a bad idea either. And so really, if you're in that mood to kind of expand your, trying something new, saying, hey, these are, people, I really enjoy this class, or I'm really enjoying this activity. I really don't get along with these individuals for various reasons. Let me try to find some commonalities, or let me try to figure out, how we can coexist, and purposefully, right? Like you said, maybe you're volunteering and you don't have to become best friends, but you're working towards that purpose together with whatever class, or activity that you're doing.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Jagmeet Sangha. As we've talked about community and the crossover into our workplace community as well. People can connect with you over at behaviorpivot.com. I'll have all the links down in the show notes. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you for being here with us today. Join us for our new series starting in November, all around your career and professional development, finding your work in the world. Are you ready to optimize your schedule for work-life success and harmony? If so, join us for our upcoming 2-day workshop on November 9th and 10th. As we head into the holiday season, it can feel like there's not enough time to get everything done. With KPIs to meet and goals to complete, it's easy to feel like your time is slipping through your fingers. And in the holiday chaos, it can feel impossible to find time for yourself. It's time to take charge of your day and align your professional and personal goals. You're running out of time to meet your KPIs and goals for the year. You're juggling leadership responsibilities and projects during the busiest time of year. Introducing the 2-day Optimize Your Schedule workshop. In this workshop, you'll learn improved decision-making and delegation techniques. Regain control over your daily routines. Overcome the internal resistance that affects your energy and relationships. Walk away with a personalized plan for clarity and focus. Finish the year strong and transform how you approach each day. Are you ready to transform how you approach delegation and leadership, even amidst the holiday chaos? Join us for this 2-day workshop and learn how to optimize your schedule for work-life success and harmony. Don't wait. Click the link now to register for the Optimize Your Schedule workshop and finish this year leading the way.
Thanks for being here. It's been quite a ride. Energy mastery, let's turn the tide. Top shelf guests, dropping wisdom bombs. Join us next week, where the energy's strong. Beyond chronic burnout, we're breaking free.